document specifying that the cemetery was for burying deceased members in accordance with Jewish law and ritual. As is all too obvious, the maintenance of individual plots and of the fencing and the gates is no longer what it should be. Things have rotted and toppled over. The gates are rusted, the locks are gone, there's been vandalism. By now the place has become the butt end of the airport, and what you're hearing from a few miles away is the steady din of the New Jersey Turnpike. Of course, I thought first of the truly beautiful places where my father might be buried, the places where he and my mother used to swim together when they were young, and the places where he loved to swim at the shore. Yet, despite the fact that looking around at the deterioration here breaks my heart, as it probably does yours, and perhaps even makes you wonder why we're assembled on grounds so badly scarred by time, I wanted him to lie close to those who loved him and from whom he descended. My father loved his parents, and he should be near them. I didn't want him to be somewhere alone. She was silent for a moment to collect herself. A gentle-faced woman in her mid-30s, plainly pretty as her mother had been. She looked all at once in no way authoritative or even brave, but like a 10-year-old overwhelmed. Turning toward the coffin, she picked up a clod of dirt and, before dropping it onto the lid, said lightly, with the air still of a bewildered young girl, "Well, this is how it turns out. There's nothing more we can do, Dad." Then she remembered his own stoical maxim from decades back and began to cry. "There's no remaking reality," she told him. "Just take it as it comes. Hold your ground and take it as it comes." The next to throw dirt onto the lid of the coffin was Howie, who'd been the object of his worship when they were children, and in return had always treated him with gentleness and affection, patiently teaching him to ride a bike and to swim and to play all the sports in which Howie himself excelled. It still appeared as if he could run a football through the middle of the line, and he was 77 years old. He'd never been hospitalized for anything, and though a sibling bred of the same stock, had remained triumphantly healthy all his life. His voice was husky with emotion when he whispered to his wife, "My kid brother. It makes no sense." Then he too addressed everyone. "Let's see if I can do it. Now let's get to this guy. About my brother." He paused to compose his thoughts so that he could speak sensibly. His way of talking and the pleasant pitch of his voice were so like his brother's that Phoebe began to cry, and quickly Nancy took her by the arm. "His last few years," he said, gazing toward the grave, "he had health problems, and there was also loneliness, no less a problem. We spoke on the phone whenever we could, though near the end of his life, he cut himself off from me, for reasons that were never clear. From the time he was in high school, he had an irresistible urge to paint. And after he retired from advertising, where he'd made a considerable success, first as an art director and then when he was promoted to be a creative director, after a life in advertising, he painted practically every day of every year that was left to him. We can say of him what has doubtless been said by their loved ones about nearly everyone who is buried here. He should have lived longer. He should have indeed." Here, after a moment's silence, the resigned look of gloom on his face gave way to a sorrowful smile. "When I started high school and had team practice in the afternoons, he took over the errands that I used to run for my father after school. He loved being only 9 years old and carrying the diamonds in an envelope in his jacket pocket onto the bus to Newark, with the setter and the sizer and the polisher and the watch repairman our father used, each sat in a cubbyhole of his own, tucked away on Frelinghuysen Avenue. Those trips gave that kid enormous pleasure. I think watching these artisans doing their lonely work in those tight little places gave him the idea for using his hands to make art. I think looking at the facets of the diamonds through my father's jewelry loop is something else that fostered his desire to make art. A laugh suddenly got the upper hand with Howie. A little flurry of relief from his task, and he said, I was the conventional brother. And me, diamonds fostered a desire to make money. Then he resumed where he'd left off, looking through the large, sunny window of their boyhood years. Our father took a small ad in the Elizabeth Journal once a month. During the holiday season, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, he took the ad once a week. Trade in your old watch for a new one. All these old watches that he accumulated, most of them beyond repair, were dumped in a drawer in the back of the store. My little brother could sit there for hours, spinning the hands and listening to the watches tick, if they still did, and studying what each face and what each case looked like. That's what made that boy tick. 100, 200 trade-in watches, the entire drawer full, probably worth no more than $10. But to his budding artist's eye, that backroom watch drawer was a treasure chest. He used to take them and wear them. He always had a watch that was out of that drawer, one of the ones that worked. And the ones he'd tried to make work, whose looks he liked, he'd fiddle around with, but to no avail. Generally, he'd only make them worse. Still, that was the beginning of his using his hands to perform meticulous tasks. My father always had 2 girls just out of high school, in their late teens or early 20s, helping him behind the counter in the store. Nice, sweet Elizabeth girls, well-mannered, clean-cut girls, always Christian, mainly Irish Catholic, whose fathers and brothers and uncles worked for Singer Sewing Machine or for the Biscuit Company or down at the port. He figured nice Christian girls would make the customers feel more at home. If asked to, the girls would try on the jewelry for the customers, model it for them, and if we were lucky, the women would wind up buying. As my father told us, when a pretty young woman wears a piece of jewelry, other women think that when they wear the piece of jewelry, they'll look like that too. The guys off the docks at the port who came in looking for engagement rings and wedding rings for their girlfriends would sometimes have the temerity to take the salesgirl's hand in order to examine the stone up close. My brother liked to be around the girls too, and that was long before he could even begin to understand what it was he was enjoying so much. He would help the girls empty the window and the showcases at the end of the day. He'd do anything at all to help them. They'd empty the windows and cases of everything but the cheapest stuff, and just before closing time, this little kid would open the big safe in the back room with the combination my father had entrusted to him. I'd done all these jobs before him, including getting as close as I could to the girls, especially to 2 blonde sisters named Harriet and May. Over the years, there was Harriet, May, Anne-Marie, Jean. There was Myra, Mary, Patty. There was Kathleen and Corinne. And every one of them took a shine to that kid. Corinne, the great beauty, would sit at the workbench in the back room in early November, and she and my kid brother would address the catalogs the store printed up and sent to all the customers for the holiday buying season, when my father was open 6 nights a week, and everybody worked like a dog. If you gave my brother a box of envelopes, he could count them faster than anybody because his fingers were so dexterous and because he counted the envelopes by 5s. I'd look in, and sure enough, that's what he'd be doing, showing off with the envelopes for Corinne. How that boy loved doing everything that went along with being the jeweler's reliable son. That was our father's favorite accolade, reliable. Over the years, our father sold wedding rings to Elizabeth's Irish and Germans and Slovaks and Italians and Poles, most of them young working-class stiffs. Half the time after he'd made the sale, we'd be invited, the whole family, to the wedding. People liked him. He had a sense of humor, and he kept his prices low, and he extended credit to everyone. So we'd go, first to the church, then on to the noisy festivities. There was the Depression, there was the war, but there were also the weddings. There were our salesgirls. There were the trips to Newark on the bus with hundreds of dollars worth of diamonds stashed away in envelopes in the pockets of our Mackinac.